Here with us in the studio to start off is John Allison. He's a longtime banking executive who was in the running to lead the Treasury in Trump's administration, and Gilad Sher, a veteran Israeli negotiator who's played a big part in Camp David, among many other negotiations. Thanks, gentlemen, for being with us. Yeah. Gilad, I want to get your take now that Air Force One has officially left the building, left the Middle East. There was a lot of talk about the anticipation here. It seems that Trump left with nothing concrete in hand. Is that important, or was the symbolism of coming here, of meeting with Netanyahu and Abbas, enough?
There's a certain importance for President Trump to visit, the first visit abroad here in the Middle East. That's for sure. I mean, that's quite a statement. But now that all the ceremonies and statements and speeches are over, it's time to see whether he would have the attention span needed for being hands-on to facilitate a process that would provide some tangible results. That's the question now.
Do you think he left Israelis and Palestinians with concrete steps forward? We heard him speaking today at the Israel Museum. A lot of words of praise for Israel, for the Netanyahu government in many ways. Also a warm speech with Mahmoud Abbas. Is there a sense now of what steps are next?
My personal perspective is negative on that. I mean, there was a lot of motherhood and apple pie, but there was no concrete steps, no concrete processes, no concrete plans ahead, and even not a concrete agenda in terms of what do we do next. So I believe that once he's back home and he tackles his domestic problems, we will see how high the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is on his priority list. And that's only time will tell.
John, I want to ask you, whatever concrete achievement he may or may not come out with this visit, his behavior on this trip, I would sum it up in one word not often used to describe him: presidential. There were no embarrassing tweets. He seemed to stick to the script. It makes me wonder, are there two Donald Trumps, one who's in the White House and one who's going to go go abroad?
Well, in some ways, I hope there are two, because he was very presidential in this visit, and I was pleased to hear that, because in the White House, of course, he can do some pretty outrageous things, which is a little scary. I will say this: he's a deal maker, and he believes he can make a deal in the Mideast. Now, whether he's got the tenacity and the focus to do that, and whether he could do it, I don't know, but he believes he can. And the good news for Israel, in his election, and I believe in his beliefs, he is very pro-Israel. He will be supportive of Israel, I think, very much so. I mean, he sees Israel as a very positive force in the Mideast. Now, he's careful about what he says.
But can he play an honest broker? That's always the phrase he'll be used to describe the role America's supposed to play.
I think he can try to play a deal maker, and he's been very successful in making deals, but he's not always successful, and unfortunately, he's not a really long-term strategic kind of guy. He's, how can I figure out how to make this deal, and if he gets it done, great. If he doesn't, he may pass it off to somebody else who may or may not be able to do it.
All right, there's a lot more to talk about with this. We're definitely not going to stop here. We're going to take you from here to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem, to see how Israelis and Palestinians actually see the concrete achievements of this visit, if any, going forward. But let's pause now and jump to Manchester. There, a vigil is being held as we speak, of course, in honor of the victims. 22 people killed, another 59 wounded in that suicide bombing at Manchester's Arena at 10:30 p.m. last night. Our Jonathan Sashadati is standing by there. Jonathan, what can you tell us about the scene there this evening?
Here around me, there's a lot of applause for Eddie Newman, the Lord Mayor, who's just spoken to this crowd that's gathered here. Hundreds of people, if not more, who have come to show their solidarity in Manchester's Albert Square with the victims of the attack last night, and to show that they stand.
All right, Jonathan, it looks like that applause at that vigil is sort of cut out your audio, so we'll come back to you in a moment. That vigil being held this evening in Manchester for those 22 people killed, 59 wounded. A bomber has been identified as a 22-year-old. We'll come back to Jonathan in a little while.
Well, I want to ask Gilad, terrorism, that was a major theme of President Trump's visit, trying to build this coalition that would include Israel together with countries such as Saudi Arabia that it has no diplomatic links and they're divided on the Palestinian issue. How realistic is it possible for him to sort of make this coalition, especially that would stand against Iran that he kept talking about?
Yeah, I think that here the statement is quite important. I mean, countering the fundamentalist Islamic terrorism and violence is something that is a common concern to more than just the Western world. It's also a big concern to the relatively moderate Sunni axis or the Arab Quartet, let's call it like that. And I believe that that there could be some cooperation on that ground in terms of what President Trump had in mind, but this is not sufficient in order to move forward. We need a much more concrete statement on the two-state for two-people solution. This was not heard during the 24 hours.
You mean the Saudis will need that, or the other Arab
Nobody
partners?
heard that. I mean, I don't think that it was mentioned during his visit to Riyadh, and it wasn't mentioned neither in Bethlehem nor in Jerusalem. So it's something that I would expect him to start formulating in a way that would be clearer.
John, do you think that there's maybe a misinterpretation of what the goals were here? Because a lot of talk, at least in this part of the world, was that Israeli-Palestinian peace would be the focus of this visit, naturally. But we've heard from President Trump throughout the visit, including today speaking at the Israel Museum, the goal is about countering terror, in fact. How high on the priority list do you think that peace in this part of the world is in Trump's administration?
I think Trump is mostly focused on terror. In his political campaign, he talked a lot about terror. You may remember one of his first political acts was to stop immigration from 7 countries that have a history of terrorism into the United States. He does view very consciously Iran as a source, the major source, not the only source of terrorism.
I want to just pause there really quickly, because how do you view that large shift where we had a candidate Trump that was very pro-Israel and seemingly anti-Muslim, that Muslim ban that we all remember well, to now very sort of opening up to the Sunni Muslim world?
Well, I don't have an answer to that. He does move. I mean, he's done this in all of his policies. He does move all over the place. I don't think he's become any less Israel. I think he's probably got some advisors that have told him practically to deal with terrorism, he's got to get the support of
John, hold that thought.
Americans.
We're gonna take a brief break, but stay with us.